So I'm excited to see what happens when in the aftermath of the pandemic. I mean, one of the things that the pandemic has done is I think it's forced people to focus on what matters to them. And it's really emboldened a lot of people to start firms, especially women and lawyers of color who are just ready to throw up their hands at big law.
Are you toying with the idea of going solo, but scared to take that leap? How do you know when it's time? How do you know where to even start? How do you effectively serve your clients and run a business by yourself? Our guest this week is Carolyn Elefant, and she's a guru for lawyers ready to start their own practice. You may already know her as the author of Solo by Choice, which is being released as a third edition, and the founder of myshingle.com, a resource guide for solo attorneys. Carolyn and I dive into our respective journeys into going solo and breaking out of the big firm paradigms. Going solo is about creating something that fits your strengths and goals, and at the same time creates a better, more dedicated client experience and better access to justice. We'll talk about a range of challenges, like how to create a frictionless client experience, getting the ideal client to self-select for you and your firm, and controlling your own hours, pricing, and sanity. We also cover the tools and systems we use to stay successful: virtual assistants, tech tools, and a great team. Ultimately, it's about the freedom to create the kind of practice you want and the myriad ways you can shape that and be set up for long-term success. Let's get to the interview. I'm John Strohmeyer, and this is the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. The market for legal services is shifting, and lawyers who don't adapt will be left behind. This podcast gives you a competitive edge in today's market by sharing the client service lessons you probably didn't learn in law school or in law practice. Let's start the show. Hey 5-Star listeners, before we start, I want to tell you about our amazing sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a virtual receptionist service for small businesses with a specialty in working with solo and small law firms. I signed up with them within weeks of starting my firm because they are affordable for even the smallest solo practice. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in Spanish or English, screen and schedule new leads, and can even take payments. And now they're answering calls 24 hours a day. So even when you're asleep, they're still working. Even beyond the phone, they've got live agents and chatbots ready to capture leads on your website, by text, and by Facebook Messenger. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front line so you can work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $70 a month for calls and $100 a month for chats. Smith AI is offering a free trial, and our podcast listeners get an extra $100 discount code with promo code 5-STAR. That's FIVESTAR. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. Carolyn, it is an honor and a privilege to have you here on the podcast.
Yes, thanks so much for inviting me, John. It's nice to meet you.
So as we're sitting here, I have in front of me my copy of Solo by Choice. I bought and read this when I was finishing up my LLM in 2010. I remember reading this on the subways in New York when I was at NYU, looking at things and saying, oh my God, it's 2010. There are no jobs. I am just going to have to go out and do this by myself. And that was terrifying. Obviously, flash forward 12 years later. I've been solo for 4 years. I have a staff, but a lot of the things that I do, I could credit to, a lot of the confidence that I got out of picking up things from your book. And, at the same time, I'd also read Foonberg's book at this, right before this as the primer on what do I do? What am I thinking? And most importantly, am I committing career suicide by even considering this?
So good. Well, I'm glad that the message got across because I felt that it was most important to speak to people who weren't necessarily sure about whether they wanted to start or not. The Foonberg book, of course, is a classic, but it always seemed to me that it presupposed that people were going to start and it told you how to do it. And I felt that there was a need to reach people who, like even myself, were kind of on the fence, worried about what starting a firm could mean for your future. So I'm glad that that message came through.
Yeah. And, pulling it back, the thought and a lot of the reason that I ended up going solo was having more control, not only over, the day-to-day legal practice,
but the day-to-day management of the firm and how we take care of clients. A lot of what I talk about here, it's about integrating the client service issues I learned from the hotel. How do we take better care? And just kind of putting the words in your mouth that I think I got from your book. It's about having that freedom to choose exactly what you want.
Yeah, that to me is the most exciting part about starting a law firm, is being able to create something out of nothing except for your brain and your skills and your ambition, but also being able to build something that fits your strengths and the lifestyle that you want to need and the goals and the mission that you think are important. And serving clients is not just something that is lawyers do to be compatible with their lifestyle, but it's also it's important to justice. It's an access to justice issue when you're able to serve clients in a way that shows respect for them and treats them and handles their case effectively and with efficiency.
Yeah, I really like that, because it's not just about, as an estate planner, it's not just, look, do we put your names in the right places on the documents? That, if anything, is the last part of my job. It's really figuring out what the problem is for the clients. What will the mess look like if they don't do anything? And how can we solve that mess now? And, a lot of it ends up being documents down the line. But for me, it was the ability to say, all right, we know what this mess could look like. How can we start solving it earlier? And we're not just solving it for, the tax problem. There are a lot of other problems that will show up. Let's focus on those as well.
Yeah, I think that is sort of the best thing about the attorneys that I've worked with for my own personal reasons have always been focused on solution. I mean, even as an attorney, if you start showing me a document and things that have to be filled out, I mean, I'm going to start to fall asleep. It's boring to me. I don't want to deal with that stuff. But if you explain to me that this is going to secure my future, or as with an attorney I work with this summer, I'm going to help you and your daughter buy this house, then that's what my focus is, and they can handle all the paperwork and just make it easy for me to fill out and sign the forms. So I think it's much better when attorneys focus on that. I suppose you could have clients who love looking at forms and want to know all those details, but I can't stand that stuff.
I mean, looking back, the clients who do typically end up being either engineers or doctors.
Yes.
Because they enjoy the inner workings of it, where most clients, they don't care if they get a will or a trust or the singing bush that will just tell people what to do when they're dead. They just want to know that their family is going to be taken care of. And putting it at our goal is to make sure things are easy when they're gone, whether it's a simple gift to somebody. Make sure people understand, all right, if Bill is not alive, who gets it? The client should be able to read it, not just the lawyers.
Yes, that's important too. I have my own gripes about estate plans and not being able to read them, or having to tote a 75-page document to a bank so that they can figure out where the authorization is. So that's something that I would have expected to have evolved more, by this point in time.
Yeah, and it's, to show off, what are we doing? Well, we make sure we focus on the diagrams first, and then we inundate them with the homework of reading at the last point. But it really is clients don't need, and they're not impressed necessarily by a tome of things. They want those easy solutions. So to make it a little bit more practical, you've written this book. It's been almost 15 years. You've got the new version coming out. What do you see as the biggest advances, and not only the big advances, but almost the best low-hanging fruit for attorneys to be focusing on now?
Yeah, so there have been a lot of changes. One of the things that really struck me when I was writing it, though, and in fact, I had to kind of upend the entire chapter on clients, because first of all, clients are coming to attorneys now from the internet, and there's often a long tail before they actually come and hire an attorney. And so I spoke to a lot of the issues, that you want to educate and be able to sort of pre-vet clients before they come to you. And then just the vast amount of automation and outsourcing that's available to be able to bring clients into your system. I mean, when I started the book 10 or 15 years ago, when I did the first version, the scenario was a client would call your office, and maybe you had a virtual office with a receptionist, or maybe you were picking up the landline yourself, or maybe if you had resources, you actually hired someone to answer the phones. And today, of course, almost every lawyer is using some kind of an answering service. And then, of course, there's also automation. You might be using Google Voice. You might be having clients actually schedule appointments themselves. So we've also seen clients change too, because 15 years ago, I think many clients would have been very nervous. I don't even know how many clients were using the internet 15 years ago. Might have been nervous about scheduling something themselves or pushing buttons to get to a receptionist or something. And now clients are also much more accustomed to that because they're doing everything else online. They're banking online, they're dating online, they're buying things from Amazon online. And so they're much more accustomed to it. And so the book, the chapter on the client is really aimed to get people focused on dealing with what clients are like today and to leverage outsourcing and automation, which are much more affordable and much more sophisticated than they were 10 or 12 years ago.
Yeah, I really like that because it's something I noticed years ago. We don't just get compared to other lawyers, we're getting compared to every other service provider. And the fact that lawyers, stuck in, we've got to start, we're not starting from a blank page, but there's still some aspect of bespoke creation for each client when they may not need it, or that slows the process down unnecessarily. People don't really care about that.
Yeah, no, it's true. There's actually a portion in the book in the new book that might be of interest to you, because I talk about the frictionless client experience, and of course, a website like Amazon, and I'm sure there are also, you being from the hotel industry, they're probably you have used that phrase, frictionless experience, where you have these minimal touch points, make it very easy for somebody to just push a button and buy. And so I talk about the frictionless experience and what attorneys can do to make the experience frictionless for clients, which, at least for tech-savvy clients, a frictionless experience would include a form where you could fill out information or upload documents. It would include something an engagement letter that you could e-sign instead of getting something in the mail and signing it and sending it back. And it would include, different, a client portal where a client could check on information instead of having the attorney to always have to be there to feed it to them all the time. So those are some of the features, and I think that's a kind of experience that at least more modern clients are very interested in. I mean, because that's what they get when they go to the hotels or to Amazon or to Disney. There are some challenges for clients who are less technologically savvy, and there are a couple of tips for how to deal with that. But I think if you're starting a firm today, you really need to be forward-looking anyway, and you've got to focus your efforts on the majority of clients who do have technological capabilities. And then once you get established, you can think about whether you want to make yourself available to those who aren't able to use tech, maybe by having training sessions, maybe having somebody who can help them hands-on, like an assistant or something like that, because it is important to be able to reach everybody. But anyway, again, this frictionless client experience is something that wasn't mentioned in the first book.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, the idea of, and at the hotel, we didn't say frictionless. It was the phrase that the general manager used was, when you come to the Four Seasons, we're going to save you time so you can go make more money. Primarily because we were, 5 days out of the week, a business hotel. So people were coming in on business. We were there, room service was there, so you didn't have to think about going and finding food. We're just going to make it easy. You can focus on other things. On the weekend, obviously, that breaks down a little bit when people would come in to spend a relaxing weekend in Austin. But the idea was, if you ask for something, we're just going to take care of it. We're not going to pass things along. And the idea ultimately was, and it started getting drilled into me, I think 3 or 6 months into my time there, don't come back and ask questions of the managers if you don't know something. Come back with a proposed solution, with the thought being, if even if you're wrong, you're learning that was the wrong answer without, and so you'll be trained more so that the next time you will know that, and the friction of having to go ask for permission isn't there.
Yeah, no, that's very good advice. And that's good advice for lawyers serving clients too, is you want to be able to propose a solution as opposed to explaining all the problems and then just kind of leaving it hanging like that. So
yeah, I mean, one of the other things you had mentioned to pick up on is this minimum tech competence for our clients. I was having lunch with a few friends yesterday, one of whom both were attorneys. One does elder law, the other does probate litigation. And I'm working on a case with the probate litigator, and her client and mine are technically adverse, but everybody's working towards the same goal. We're concerned about, well, how do we get her client up to speed, because she is the elder party and doesn't do email, and we're just like, oh my goodness, how are we going to make this work without necessarily having my clients go over and open the emails for her?
Yes.
Like, oh. So, I mean, it's the questions of, I look at this, there are certain minimum standards. If clients aren't willing to use, if they just don't have email, that's going to make things very difficult for us. How else are we going to get documents to you? If they're unwilling to schedule calls, that's becoming a bigger red flag for me. Of, if they expect to get through the first time all the time, I would love to answer the call, but at the same time, what if I'm meeting with a client?
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's the thing that lawyers don't understand. I mean, you can set up your firm in a way that will select the clients that you want, and it really can improve your work, your sense of balance and being less frustrated. So, if you don't want to deal with clients who don't call to schedule something, or who expect to get you on the phone all the time, I mean, you can either explain to them the reason for your policy, or you don't necessarily have to take them. And I know that there are some lawyers who feel that that's a harsh outcome. What will happen to people who aren't tech savvy? What will happen to people who just like hand-holding? And I mean, there are lawyers, there's a lot of different lawyers out there, and I think that lawyers can help come up with solutions. And I think also with some people who aren't tech savvy, they may have relatives or parents or other people who can help them. I know that my mom uses a CPA who has recently gone over to email. She doesn't use email. She doesn't know how to send documents. So my sisters and I came together and came up with a solution where we're able to manage that for her. So, but there's nothing, you don't have to serve everybody. And I think one of the problems that lawyers encounter in both the type of clients they take and also practice areas is that you just get spread so thin. If you're handling clients who have demands that you don't like to accommodate. And again, there's some people who really don't mind picking up a phone in the middle of the day and answering questions. It doesn't interrupt them as much, or they have another way of dealing. It's not like every client, every attorney is not going to be able to answer a phone in the middle of the day. But you just have to do what works for you, because that's the way you avoid the frustration and the burnout that is, at one time is it still is very common to solo practice.
Yeah, I think about this as, and you hit on it, just the things I've done to make my life easier, and it's being more selective about clients, putting in those minimum standards. And I've got a new associate who works for me, and every week or so, maybe every few weeks, time is a flat circle right now, so who knows. But she'll just mention she had worked at a law firm before going to law school, and she's like, the clients we deal with, everybody's pretty nice. There's nobody I'm worried about calling or talking to. And I think that's a result of a lot of the choices I've made for my own sanity. And it just results in nice people showing up at the door and the wrong people going elsewhere.
Yeah, no, a lot of attorneys don't realize that you have a lot of control over the types of clients you get. I tend to get clients who like to ask a lot of questions about their briefs and about their papers, and I like that. So that, for me, is very enjoyable. For some lawyers, that might be, just something they just don't want to deal with. But yeah, even your marketing is going to impact the types of clients you get. I remember there was this one divorce attorney who said, if you've got if you want to get after this lazy lout of a spouse, come to me and we'll fight him to the death. So he's going to get very litigious clients, and he probably doesn't care about that. I mean, that's the kind of client he's marketing for. But, there is a lot that you can, the messages that you send out in marketing will often dictate the types of clients you get, or you can also target the types of clients that you want. So there is some degree of control.
Yeah, and just thinking back, what are the things that you might be able to pull out of that have made your life easier? The kind of small choices that now make your practice so much better for you.
Well, so definitely electronic invoicing. I've been using it for 12 or 13 years, way before my clients were often able to pay electronically, but just not having to send out, it used to take a whole weekend to get bills out, doing it in Word or WordPerfect or something. So using some sort of electronic invoicing system to get invoices out. I have actually gone to taking most of my cases on a flat fee basis. To me, that saves a lot of time, just because I know that you can track your hours, but I don't track my hours. And I just like being able to present people with a bill or the cost up front that includes all of the different components and just work from that. So that saves a lot of time too. I mean, sending out monthly invoices, even though it's all automated now and the time is in the system, is also a big time saver. And I guess the last thing is creating document portals where clients can view all of the documents in their case, and sharing documents with clients also, so that they don't ask me about them, just making the documents available. I think those are three things that have made things easy and have created a very smooth relationship with my clients. And then also, I guess the last thing would be, I've had a virtual assistant for also about 12 or 13 years. And when she first started, I didn't feel like I would need her that much, because it just seemed like she'd be taking over very small tasks. But if you add up even 5 or 15 minutes a day, it turns into real time. And so that has really allowed me to be more efficient too.
So I love flat fee billing. It's one of the things I think allows me to go to sleep at night knowing this is what's going to happen. But you do a lot of, I do zero litigation. The pushback I always get from litigators is, that's fine for you, but it would never work in litigation. Can you talk about, you've already said you send clients briefs.
Right.
Can you talk about how this works in your practice?
So for appeals, appeals are a sort of a different universe of litigation. I always know exactly what is going to be involved in the appeal, and I'll do a scope of work that includes all of the different steps. The same with litigation at the federal agency where I practice. I know what all the different steps of the process are, and what I usually do is I'll quote arrange for the different steps and let clients choose which things they want me to pursue. But I will often have sort of an out. The scope of work would include filing 3 motions. So if it turned out we had to file 4 or 5 motions, those would be outside the scope of the flat fee. In one of the appeals that I had, I scoped it out that way, and we were right on budget. And then after we argued the case, there was an odd motion that came up that needed more work, and that was something that wasn't anticipated. But I think, lawyers do know how much the case is going to cost. I think in most of instances, they don't want to say what it's going to cost because they're afraid that it's going to turn the client away. But I think for a lawyer to say that they don't know the cost of the case is like a lawyer saying, I don't know what the procedure in this case is going to be. Really? So yeah. I think that, and I think I'm sure there are situations like completely novel litigation you've never done before, or cases that are just very bespoke or very unique. I'm not saying that the flat fee has to apply across the board, but I would expect that I would say probably in 75% or 80% of litigation cases, lawyers know exactly what it's going to cost, or at least what the range is going to be. They just don't want to say what it is.
Yeah, just thinking back at the places where I worked, where the work was done hourly, they could never tell the client up front what it was going to cost, but the moment they were looking at the time worked, they knew exactly what was wrong and how much time I should have spent doing whatever it was. And I mean, it's just that disconnect, and taking it out. People are worried, well, oh my gosh, I can't bill hourly. I might not get my hourly rate, or I'm sorry, I might not bill flat fee. I need to get my hourly rate, otherwise things don't work. I can't take credit cards. We're going to pay 2.5% on it. It's like, well, you can make a choice.
Right,
you can make it easy. God, I just remember taking credit cards and not even thinking about it. I think 95% of the money in my firm comes in through credit cards at this point.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a bigger change too. And the thing is with hourly fees too, I think in many of the instances where people aren't able to collect the fees is because the client runs out of money because they didn't know how much the case is going to cost. I think if you quote somebody that a case is going to be $25,000 at the beginning, they're at least they know it and they can budget for it, versus if it, starts, you say, well, we can do this for like 10 and then it's 25,000. They may have run out of money at 15K. So.
Right. The client hears the low end of the budget and says,
yes.
Got it. I can do that, not the high end.
Right.
On the virtual assistant, I think this is one of the big advances as well of our developing digital world. Having one for 12 years, I'm thinking back to what was I doing 12 years ago? I was still in law school. We were communicating with people clearly by email. We'd been doing that for 15 years at that point. But how did you manage to, how did you get started with the virtual assistant? And what does that role look like now?
Yeah, so it may have been longer than 12 years. And, I've never met her. I've talked to her on the phone a couple of times. We usually communicate by email. So back then, I found her through a referral from another attorney, because back then, as you said, there weren't a lot of these job sites where you could find them, or these companies that train virtual assistants for law firms. So I just spoke to her on the phone, and then she started doing work. She was doing some of the tech work, like posting things on my blog for me, and then just making reservations for trips and sending documents to clients, and doing, I guess, some sort of like light paralegal work, putting together joint appendixes and exhibits for cases. So it just, it really wasn't anything that was structured. I know that today when lawyers bring on virtual assistants, they're much more structured about what their role will be, and they have systems in place. And my assistant kind of helped me build some of the systems that we have, because, even back then you weren't really talking about systems. So she helped with that. But, again, at the time she started, that was like before Slack and before a lot of these like Trello or project tools. So we did start communicating by email, and we still communicate by email. And I know that's, a lot of people now communicate with virtual assistants differently. They use interoffice tools or things like that. But it just was, I never had any compunctions about delegating things to her. And, I didn't feel like those were things I had to do myself. And over the course of time, I've asked her to take training to use certain new tools or products. She's become much more knowledgeable about WordPress. So I'm able to do a lot more in terms of setting up platforms for blogs and websites through her. So her role evolved over time.
Excellent. Well, as we start to bring this to a close, when is the new version of Solo by Choice coming out?
So it is very soon. The copy, the manuscript is done. And the final proofing changes are being put in. So I'm just waiting to hear from my publisher, like when when we're going to be able to start the pre-sales. But I mean, it's just like right on the cusp of the launch.
Okay, so yeah,
I can't make any more changes.
Good. So let us know. Obviously, I will need a new copy of that.
Yes.
Just to make sure what have I missed? Looking forward, what's something, what are you excited about in the future of practice?
So I'm excited to see what happens when in the aftermath of the pandemic. I mean, one of the things that the pandemic has done is I think it's forced people to focus on what matters to them. And it's really emboldened a lot of people to start firms, especially women and lawyers of color who are just ready to throw up their hands at big law. So I am excited to see an increasing number of firms started by women and lawyers of color and see what kind of an impact that has on the gender and racial diversity within the profession. And I'm also really excited to see what kind of new business models will emerge as states start to deregulate and see, what kinds of things lawyers are going to do to either take advantage of that or try to come up with systems that allow them to set themselves up so that they don't have to worry about competition from different forms. So this is a really exciting time in the profession. People are experimenting with different business models, and it just feels very different from any other place in time when I've been practicing. So that is all very exciting. I'm really looking to see what people and your lawyers of your generation and even earlier or more recently than that are really going to do, because I think that things are going to change. I think this is really happening this time.
Excellent. Carolyn, I think this is a great place to shut things down for right now. Where can our listeners find you?
Best place to find me is either my blog, myshingle.com. I'm on Twitter, just at Carolyn Elefant, and those are probably the easiest places.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcounsel.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcounsel.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.